as I was saying, this is a story of me trying to finish my diamond badge through several different avenues. And this particular story is about my attempt at doing it down in the Southeast. And I will get to the details on that. But first, what is a diamond badge? The SSA and the FAI have a badge program. And it starts with A, B, C. Then you go into bronze when you start getting across country, silver, your first actual cross country flight. Then you're gold, and then you're diamond when you start doing longer flights. So I did my first 2/3 of the diamond, which is a flight over 5,000 meters in altitude, a declared triangle of 300 kilometers. But it took me a while to try to finish my diamond with my 500-kilometer flight, which would be a 3 turn point free distance. Doesn't have to be declared in advance. You just need to fly it and submit it afterwards. So what is the Sequatchie Valley? It is based down in Tennessee, just north of Chattanooga. And basically, it's a very cool geological formation. It's a 62-mile rift in the Cumberland Plateau. So basically, the plateau, this is all the Cumberland here. There's Chattanooga right here. And it's 5 miles wide, 1,500 feet deep on both sides of the ridge. And it's a really beautiful spot. It's aligned just like sugar bushes, so northwest winds are the best days for ridge flying. And it also happens to have really good thermals and wave, but the wave is not formed by uplift from the mountains like we have here. It's actually formed by the wind going down into the trough and then back up the other side. And you could fly the entire length of the ridge in thermals or in wave without even having a ridge wind. Here's a satellite view. It's not a perfect ridge. There's a lot of nooks and crannies along the way here. And they don't really affect you too much if it's a good ridge day. If it's a northerly wind, you can get caught in the lee of one of these alcoves here. But generally, it's really a pretty phenomenal site. And there's also many fields to land in inside the valley here. It's very agricultural. So at the bottom, there used to be an operation, soaring operation, Matthews Field, in the middle, lower 2/3, right around here in the valley. They were there for a long time, but they shut down about 15 years ago. So now, when we want to fly out of there, Sarah Arnold from Chilhowie down there, about 50 miles to the east, will offer tows, and she runs an occasional camp, ridge camp down at Sequatchie, and that's what I was there for in this particular instance. For long flights, we go beyond the northern part of the ridge, we cross over the Tennessee River, and we fly the southern end into Alabama. And there's 2 routes you can do that. You can either jump 15 miles to Lookout Mountain and come down to Fort Payne down here, which is a very nice ridge line here, or you can just skip the jump if you're feeling a little more timid and follow the ridge down the river to Scottsboro. And some people have flown from Pennsylvania all the way down the Appalachians, all the way past Sequatchie and down to Gadsden. I think a couple of guys have done that. But the problem down here is the ridge is only about 300 feet. So if you fall off the ridge, you are immediately on base for a field somewhere. Makes things very interesting. So before I continue, there's a little backstory to me trying to get my 500K. Back in 2005, I went out to Marfa for a little safari, and I managed to do it. I flew 500K with 3 turn points with a friend of mine, and it was a very fun flight. This is what the terrain looks like in Marfa. It's pretty much of a moonscape. But even though I did it, I didn't claim it as my diamond because I wanted all 3 of my diamonds in the East. Better bragging rights. It's too easy out there. So this brings us back to the East in Sequatchie. In 2011, I flew this flight here, and it was another one of Sarah's ridge camps, and I did the Fort Payne route and did the jump successfully. It was a beautiful day. Came all the way down, went to Fort Payne, and on my way back, to get on the ridge to head north to finish the task, a friend of mine who was flying up in here in the plateau doing a thermal flight, he wrecked his glider. So while I was in this area trying to get back, I ended up being the only guy who could be a radio relay for him. So unfortunately, I had to. He was okay. He really messed up his back. His glider was totaled, but he's okay now. So anyway, I had to come back. I had to make this jump across the river. This is the Tennessee River here between Lookout Mountain and Sequatchie Ridge. And you have to fly across this part upwind to get back to the ridge. So after doing all that radio work, I managed to do it and I had to land. So basically that messed up that day. I had to call it a day and start over again. So here we are now in 2018. We have a fantastic ridge day. The winds are 15 to 25, gusting to 30 in places. It was pretty rough, but it was fast. But we had low ceilings and snow flurries on the north end. And there's a VOR up here at this north turn point, Hinch Mountain VOR. So I said, okay, we'll give it a shot. And I was going for Scottsboro this time, not Fort Payne, so I didn't have to make this jump because the weather was a little iffy and I wanted to try something different and see what it was like down here. Started out, went up the bridge, got all the way up to Hinch Mountain VOR. The clouds were low, there were snow flurries. The turn point is actually a little bit, the VOR is up here, the turn point's actually down here. Sorry for you folks with no camera. So when I turned VOR, the VOR was in the cloud. And I had just enough visibility to make it okay. It wasn't too bad, but it wasn't the greatest of days, but the wind was howling. So I came back and I had to make this jump south of the northern part of the ridge across the river, which is about 12 miles before you get on the southern ridge. And to do that, you need thermals. And thermals just weren't happening. So I said, okay, not working, I got time, I'll start again. So I start again here at Mineral Springs, head up the ridge, and about 40 miles into it, I get a pirate from another glider saying, conditions are deteriorating to the north. The turn point is in cloud, it's not gonna happen. So after going 40 miles back up, I said, okay, I'll head south. Hopefully things get better with thermals for the transition, and headed back down again. So here I am on my first start with an 80-mile detour. Added another hour to the day. So I come down and make the transition. It worked out pretty well. Flying along the ridge. Where are my other slides? There they are. This is what the southern part looks like, satellite. This is the river here, Tennessee River. This is the ridge down to Scottsboro. And it's kind of low down there. It's not too bad. This is what it looks like looking north. So it's only 800 feet from the top of this ridge to the water. If the ridge is working, which it was this day, it's not too bad. But if the conditions deteriorate at all, the fields are above you. You have to be able to go up to land out. And if that doesn't work, you got to go across the river to these fields here. So, you know, it's interesting. Fortunately, there was enough lift to do it. There's a bay here you have to transition across to. And right here in this box, it's a nuke plant, one of the TVA nuclear plants. So that's an interesting little landmark to be flying by. So I went down there, I made the turn point, came home. And actually, no, I had to go back up again. And the conditions were clear enough that time to get up there. And I came back, finished the task. Yay. Looks good, right? Everything looks fine. Turn points look great. Got both my turn points here in the circle there. Got my southern turn point there in the circle. But there was one little problem. When you're flying an FAA 500K task, you don't use circles, you use FAA sectors. So I made a rookie mistake. I programmed my computer with circles and not with FAI pie-shaped sectors. When I was flying such a long task, I was really zoomed out of my UDI computer. I did not know I had the program wrong. So I turned my turn points when my computer told me to turn the turn points. So that's what it looked like when I was flying. What it needed to look like was this. Only I just missed the sector. That's the northern turn point. Here's the sector. That's where I needed to be. Didn't make it. Southern turn point, same thing. Here's the sector. Here's me.
What's the scale?
What do you mean? Oh, what's this distance?
How far did you miss it by?
This is like about a mile, maybe a kilometer. So I really had no choice at that point. There was a no-go. I had to fly it again. Next day. Fortunately, I was lucky enough that the ridge winds came back. They were the right direction. They were weaker. They're only about 12 to 15, which is just good enough for Sequatchie to do a run like that. So
at what point did you realize that?
After I downloaded the flight and I put the task in and I called it up and the task said not completed. So I dug down deeper and then saw what happened. Yeah, so I came really close. If the forecast was not good the next day, I definitely would have shot myself. So here we go again. Next day, took flight up. Conditions were a lot better. The snow showers, the low clouds, all that moved off. There was just lighter wind, but it was a nice day. Definitely worth giving it another go. Got it programmed right this time. Double checked it. So flew the task, a little slower, but even without the 80-mile detour, my actual overall speed worked out pretty well. So flew it and everything looked great, except there was more problems. On that day, flew the task, everything looked great. I have 3 loggers. I have a Nano, LX Nano, which is a little portable unit. I just stick on Velcro. That's my main logger. Does everything beautifully. It did not record the flight. I don't know why. They have tricky power buttons, but I could have sworn I saw the lights on and it was working, but it did not record it. I have my Flarm. That's what this picture of. On the southern turn point there, the Flarm GPS glitched. This is 3 miles before the sector. So here we go again. Fortunately, I had my clear nav and it did everything right. That was the north sector. In the south made it. Everything's good. This verification. Task completed. Yay. Everything. So after 13 years, 3 attempts, finally able to do it. So the big question is, what's next? Hoping to do a 750K somewhere, maybe in Sequatchie, maybe out west. I don't know. We'll see. So that was a lot of information pretty quickly. Any questions? Somebody had a question about sectors?
Yeah.
What were?
I don't understand what they mean.
Well, when you're doing tasks, whether you're competing or you're doing badges, when you're competing, sectors are usually circles. And that's why I had that on my computer. When you're doing badges, they like to use FAI pie-shaped sectors. So you actually have to go around the turn point, like we used to before GPS, like a photo sector. You have to go beyond the turn point and take the picture and come back. So the pie-shaped sectors are sort of a hangover from that.
What are they actually? What is this pie-shaped thing?
It's a 45-degree, it's a 90-degree angle with the turn point at the apex of it.
Side of the turn point.
Yeah, and it expands away from you in the direction you're going from that turn point. So you have to be inside that pie shape.
Inside the sector when you
right.
go around the turn.
Right. And the salient point is you have to go past the turn point and turn around. That's the whole point of the sector.
You don't even have to really go around the turn point, you just have to get into the sector.
Or yeah, right. Or just anywhere in that sector. I mean, at 90 degrees into infinity, it gives you a lot of leeway. But the idea is to go around the turn point.
People literally have to take pictures before GPS was invented.
That was how we did it. We actually had to go take a picture and have them developed and prove that we turned the turn point properly.
That was absolutely charming.
I still have a book of sugar bush turn points with all the pictures and
People had double cameras mounted on the side of the canopy. Press.
Left turns, left turns.
left turns. Yeah. And you have to do like a wing over right over the turn point. So you picture your wing has to be pointing at the target, whether it's an airport or Mount Washington Hotel, whatever it is. Your picture has to be down the wing. Target has to be right there. If you mess that up, you don't get credit for it.
Guns over the lens.
You got pretty good at 90-degree banks.
Yeah, yeah.
To clip the turn point.
Yeah, and the 91 sports class nationals we had here, I worked in the dark room overnight. So I got to see how people screwed up in many ways.
Call them up and say, oh, I got
Yeah, that was the CD's job. I just worked in the dark room.
I can comment on it again, way back in the old days when we flew gliders that looked like that thing. You had the turn point photos, but to prove something like the 5-hour flight, you had a device in the plane mounted that had a rotating drum. It was a clock-driven thing, and you had a piece of aluminum foil wrapped around this drum. And before you took off, you had a piece of camphor. You lit the piece of camphor and smoked up the drum, and the recording of a needle. When you started, you'd rotate the drum with the needle on the ground. That would give you the baseline. Then you took off, the needle would climb up on this drum as the drum turned and indicate how high you were, both for the altitude proving for the altitude legs of the badge, and also for continuity, the fact that you in fact did do it in one flight. And you would carefully at the end of the flight take this little piece of aluminum foil, strip it out like that, I guess, when you took it off, spray it with a clear lac so that you wouldn't screw it up, and you could write on it the date of the day, and the observer would sign it on that. That's all
That is fascinating.
pre-computers and
What
whatnot.
was that? What was the device called?
Hmm?
What was the
Paragraph?
Barograph. Yeah, it's just a replugal barograph.
We have a couple upstairs,
Yeah, I was gonna look that up. If you want to show me later.
and we actually have a couple of them sitting up there.
Yeah, they a couple of mine and things like that I gave for a Fifi off.
I did too, yeah.
They're the ones that, and Jackson actually activated and flew the 126 with the Berry Group
Good.
as a sample flight, just kind of a respect to
He
the old
smoked
school.
the screen.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it was pretty cool.
That's good.
So Tim, I got a question. So
Yeah.
how long what's the duration of both of those flights? The
First one was 5 hours and change, almost 6 hours, especially that 80 mile detour. And the second one was close to 5, I think, maybe 4 3/4, somewhere around there.
So the mental fatigue has to be, I mean, you've got to be on your game. There's no autopilot. You got to be on the game the whole flight, right?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, the first one was physically more demanding because the winds were stronger and I was getting pretty beat up. The CZ was good because it has very flexible wings, and I wasn't flying with water because it was too cold. I wish I had water, but they absorbed a lot of bouncing. But it was a rough flight, and I had to do that extra 80 miles, and the low clouds and the snow flurries. It was, it was in the visibility.
But
It
you
was,
somehow got up the next day and after you
yeah,
disappointingly downloaded your turn points from the first day. and
Exactly.
Somehow got in there and did it again.
yeah, exactly.
That's the best part of the story.
Also, a good part of the story is a note at the end is the rest. This is the first 2 days of the Ridge Camp. Rain the rest of the time. So, yeah,
So it's game on.
better be lucky and good.
What time of the year?
That was March. March in the southeast, which normally it's not that cold, but it was a pretty serious cold front that went through and brought that lovely weather.
And is March the time to do it?
She always has to camp in March. Yeah, the winds are usually pretty favorable then.
And the wave camp happens on an airfield that's by the ridge, right? Because you mentioned you showed something that you have to get towed in.
Yeah. Sarah, who runs Chilhowie down in East Tennessee, this is a remote site, so she does this camp and everybody's there for a week. And sometimes as the spring goes on, she'll do, if it looks like a good day, she'll offer people to tow out of there at Marion County at the bottom of the ridge. So it's,
During the camp, she brings a tow plane in and
Yep.
fly out of the old
Yep.
field. at the
Yep,
bottom
just-
of the-
we just take over the place for a week.
And is it a GA airport?
Yeah, it is. Yep. Yeah, and they have parachuting too, so it makes things interesting as well.
So the performance of your old ship was, the CZ was,
It was 42. And with the tips, it was 44.
so now going with your new ship,
It's 48. But that doesn't tell the whole story. I mean, you talk about L over D as a touchstone for
Right.
performance. It's really, you could have, 42 and then at 80 knots, you could be falling off the curve. And at 48, the curves flattens out. And that's where the design really comes in. So you could be at 100 knots, you're flying, maybe 30 to 1.
so if you were using your new ship on
Mhm.
this task,
Yeah.
what do when you look back and analyze, what would be the advantages, disadvantages?
On a ridge flight like this, not that much more of an advantage, really. Because your rough air speeds are still fairly comparable between the different kinds of ships, and that's really your limiting factor. On the thermal transitions, it might help there because the thermal is a lot better, and gliding across, non-ridge portions, you get an advantage there. But other than that, it's not a huge advantage. So really, you just want as good a rough air speed as you can get.
You can get beat up on the ridge.
Oh, yeah. Especially for many hours.
And so what airspeed were you using?
Probably close to 100
Oh,
when I could. Yeah,
fast. Wow.
yeah.
So how high did you?
On the
get?
first day, and the second day when it wasn't as strong, maybe it was 85, 90.
So essentially just to deal with the.
Yeah, my rough air in the CZ was 97. So,
So just trying to punch through it.
as much as possible. Yeah. It's
How
definitely.
high did you get during the whole trip? Your maximal height?
Usually below ridge top for the ridge cruises, thermal transitions, maybe up about 4,000. Then I could do a final glide down onto the ridge again. And a couple of spots on the ridge, I thermaled up just to be safe because it got a little weaker as I went farther south.
So it's the wave characteristic there that you're actually below the ridge and riding the wave there?
Well, not a wave, it's just a ridge flight.
Okay.
Yeah, there wasn't any wave involved here. I have flown the entire 62 miles in wave before, but this was purely ridge.
How much did you build up to it? So, I mean, I'm assuming that was, you've had many flights on that ridge before.
Yeah.
Exploring all the contours.
Yeah. So how many flights I had before I did that?
Well, just an idea of, how long does it take you for a flight like that to scout out the terrain and really be comfortable in knowing the transitions and knowing the
On
field?
this ridge, it's not that complicated. I mean, if you know how to handle there's a couple of like bays in the ridge cut down there. If you know how to transition from those, it takes, just a couple of flights to figure out what's going on there. So it's not really, didn't need that much research, but it just happened that I've flown a bunch there before. The transition to the Lookout Mountain, where you cross the river to go south to Fort Payne, that takes a little more practice. Because going downwind is pretty easy. You just if you thermal up to 4,000, you just cross the river, head right to Lookout Mountain, and then you're on the ridge again, you're zooming. But coming back, if you don't have a good cloud street, it's a little nerve-wracking. So that does take some practice.
Because you have so far to go upwind.
Yeah, 15 miles. And like when I did, the one time I did it, I was doing that radio relaying and I was trying to get enough height to get across while all that was going on. It was very interesting crossing the river there. Yeah, yeah, it kind of did. And the only field there in the next to the river is there's a little park there with maybe 1,000-foot field,
That's your bailout.
pretty much, yeah, or the water,
Or the water.
or the water, yeah.
God.
Yeah.
Flying out in Marfa, there's not very many, even though you chose to do the east because it's more challenging.
Yeah.
but Landing out in places in Marfa and places out there.
Yeah.
Not good.
Yeah.
They're not good.
Yeah, that 500, I was somewhere between 12 and 14K for that flight, but that
Wow.
it didn't seem high.
And that was thermal?
That was all thermal, right? So the first one was all thermal, but they're
Yeah.
Western thermals.
How did you dress to withstand the cold for up to 6 hours?
I'm a firm believer in layers. You know, a few pairs of socks, long johns. You know, it's called diplomes. You got the 750K diplome and the 1,000K diplome, and now there's a 2,000K, which has been breached several times in the last decade.
Whoa.
So those are the next levels.
Are you gonna go for anything like that? Or are you pretty happy with this?
With the turn points the way they are in the ridge system, 500 is about all you can do there. To get 750, you need to do like really big thermal triangles. And out west is really good for that. I tried to do it out in Moriarty in New Mexico, near Albuquerque. Operates, yeah. 1,000, I don't know, 1,000 in the east.
We have
You can do it on the ridge.
Tony Lott did the 1,000 down at in West Virginia. In the contest down there. landing.
What's the chance of that?
Well, he probably knew where to turn, co-pilot probably knew right where that turn point was.
Well, maybe.
Yeah, well, he was from the operation that was right near the turn point. You flying up to these things, you get experiences like that. That's where Tim, you can talk all night long about different things.
Yeah, well, Carl Streetic flew from his place down to Gadsden. He was one of the guys who did that. And with a couple of jumps, you can get from the main Appalachian run
Yeah.
over to Sequatchie and then down to Gadsden. That's about as far as south as you can go.
House Field.
Yeah.
What about George McCord flying from here? Do you remember that story?
The Delaware Water Gap. or something.
Yeah.
And so he didn't really plan to, but he got the right day and he flew down to the Delaware Water Gap from here. And he called his wife and said, I'm in the Delaware Water Gap. And she drove all the way down, but she forgot the trailer. Forgot. And that was the Big Crown Vic. You remember?
Yeah.
She must have thought all the way down there, I'll show you for driving. I forgot the trailer. I remember that story. Oh my God.
Can't you just put the glider in the trunk of a Crown Vic?
No, apparently she made him drive back, leave the glider there, drive back and pick up the trailer with her because she was tired of his shenanigans. George did some epic stuff as well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he did a lot of the development work on the ridge, that Pennsylvania ridge, had Tom Nouse.
Yeah. Yeah, George is a trooper. And so was Carmen.
Was here to Whiteface Mountain and back.
Yeah, he liked going west. That's something I still haven't really explored yet.
That across Champlain.
Yeah,
across
that
that
little body of
valley.
water there, yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you think around here, doing thermals and maybe going up to Newport and over to Mount Washington and back to Rutland? Is that a feasible thing?
Yeah,
On a good day.
That's been done.
Do though.
Yeah, that's about as you, or down in North Adams. You know, go up to JP, Mount Washington, North Adams. That's about the biggest triangle we can do here.
That's a doable thing on a good day.
Yeah, it's been done.
Okay.
Yeah, it's tight. You know,
Yeah.
some commented on speeds. I guess you did it. If you don't fly fast, you're never going to get around the course.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you're talking the distance course, you got to fly fast.
The sun will go down.
Right. That's why fast
Pretty
isn't
good
just for
day.
racing. It's just, you're always racing against Mother Nature. So that's why you always got to fly faster if you can. That should be your goal. Because days tend to go away eventually.
Do you know that song that some guy from roughly your part of the country who was also a songwriter, country western kind of things? He wrote a bunch of songs about gliding.
Oh, yeah. Gosh.
And he had one that's one more thermal. Oh God, give me one more thermal.
Yeah.
It was absolutely fabulous.
Yeah, he was great. I can't remember his name, though.
So next, just remind us what's next. What's the next goal?
I would like to do a 750.
And
And
where?
Sequatchie is a good place to do it. The guy who didn't make it that day, he was trying to do that. If you start on the ridge, you can use that as a leg, the ridge leg, and then you head west over the plateau for a turn point out there. It's doable.
Game on, huh?
Hang on. But I'd also like to go back out to Moriarty and fly into Colorado. That's a real nice flight. So we'll see.
Well, if you need crew, I have a feeling there's quite a few people who think that would be really.
We'll see. We got to test that theory.
Yeah, or maybe not.
And make sure you hook up the right trailer. That's
Right. The red
the red one.
Tango Lima,
The
not
red
the
light
blue
one.
Tango Lima. It could be a mix up. Actually, the blue Tango Lima trailer is not going to make it far. So the wheel will fall off. So you'll know it's the wrong trailer.
Very likely, yeah.
Well, thank you, Tim, very much.
Sorry for the delays and technical glitches.
No,
That's
it's
the way it
worth it.
goes. So if it flies 750, I'll let you know.
Thank you all out there,
Yeah,
and
thank you.
hopefully you all can see the the crowd here.
Yeah, thank you, Tim, for your first PowerPoint. I'm impressed.
There he is.
There he is.
Thank you. That was great.
Jen, did you just say something?
Oh, I just was thanking him, and I know it's his first PowerPoint, so congratulations. We really appreciate you putting it together. Sorry about the technical difficulties, but don't let that stop you from doing more. You got lots of good stuff to talk about.
Thanks, Jen.
Well, thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks a lot, Tim. Really informative. Great.